There is a particular kind of loneliness in living a life that looks normal from the outside while feeling almost absent from it on the inside. Nothing is obviously broken. You still reply to people, you still handle what needs to be handled, you still show up, smile when appropriate, say the right thing, keep things moving. And yet beneath all of that, there is a quiet and unsettling truth. You do not feel like yourself anymore. Not because you changed in some dramatic way, because you disappeared slowly. You disappeared in the places where love seemed conditional. In childhood, maybe. In the family that praised you when you were easy, but went cold when you had needs. In relationships where peace mattered more than honesty. In rooms where being fully yourself created tension, disappointment, or withdrawal. So you learned something early. You learned that love could be lost. And more importantly, you learned that parts of you could be edited in order to keep it. That is how it begins. Not with weakness, not with vanity, with intelligence, with emotional survival. You start noticing what gets approval and what creates distance, what makes people soften toward you and what makes them pull away. You become observant, careful, adaptable. You learn how to be the version of yourself that causes the least trouble, helpful, mature, understanding, undemanding, easy to love. At first, this does not feel like losing yourself. It feels like becoming good at relationships, good at reading people, good at staying connected. It may even feel like love. People appreciate you. They rely on you. They trust you. They call you strong, selfless, stable. They come to you for comfort. They tell you how much they admire the way you handle everything. And a part of you feels proud of that. Because if being needed keeps you close to others, it feels safer than being fully known. But there's a cost to becoming emotionally fluent in everyone else while becoming increasingly distant from yourself. Eventually, you wake up inside a life you carefully built, and something about it feels unfamiliar. Your routines are there, your responsibilities are there, your relationships are there, but you are not fully there. You do not know what you really want anymore. You do not know what you genuinely feel until hours later, sometimes days later, after the moment has passed and everyone else has already moved on. You second-guess your reactions. You explain yourself too quickly. You say yes while your body is saying no. You smile while something in you is going numb. And after a while, even your preferences begin to blur. What do you actually like? What do you actually believe? What would you choose if no one around you had an opinion about it? This is the part many people do not understand. Identity loss is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is quiet. It feels like blankness, like moving through the day with a low, steady absence, like being present in your own life in the most technical sense, but not in a way that feels alive. You may blame yourself for this. You may call yourself ungrateful, confused, too sensitive, too much in your head. But what you are feeling is not random. It is often the consequence of leaving yourself over and over again for the sake of attachment. That is what self-abandonment really is, not one big betrayal, 1,000 small ones. Ignoring the discomfort in your chest because you don't want to disappoint someone. Minimizing what hurt you because you don't want to seem difficult. Making yourself smaller to keep the peace. Swallowing anger before you can even name it. Translating your own needs into something more acceptable. You do this long enough and the inner self begins to go quiet. Why would it keep speaking clearly if it is never truly heard? This is where the wound becomes deeper than stress. It becomes existential. Because identity is not built from roles, it is built from contact. Contact with your own feelings, your own desires, your own grief, your own anger, your own tenderness, your own truth. And when that contact keeps getting interrupted, a split begins to form. There's the self that functions, and there's the self that got buried. The self that still knows what hurts, what matters, what is too much, what is missing. The self that had to go underground because it threatened attachment. This is why the idea of the shadow can be so useful here, not as something dark or dangerous, but as everything you pushed out of awareness in order to stay loved. Your anger may be there, your refusal may be there, your sensitivity, your directness, your hunger, your softness, your ambition, even your joy. All the parts that once made someone uncomfortable may have been hidden so deeply that now they feel unfamiliar, even to you. And the tragedy is that the false self often gets rewarded. It becomes socially successful. It looks dependable, pleasant, easy to be around. But inwardly, it can feel like emotional homelessness. You know how to perform closeness while feeling unseen. You know how to be valuable without feeling known. You know how to stay in relationships where your role is clear, but your personhood is not. That kind of emptiness follows people everywhere. Into work, into love, into friendships, into solitude, into the mirror. Sometimes it turns into exhaustion that sleep cannot fix. Sometimes it becomes numbness. Sometimes it becomes resentment with no obvious target. Sometimes it becomes the strange ache of looking at your own life and feeling like you are standing just outside of it. And still, many people keep trying harder. They try to become more likable, more healed, more useful, more impressive, as if the answer is one more improved version of the self. But that is often the old wound wearing a new face, because the answer is not to become someone new. The answer is to stop abandoning the one who was left behind. And that kind of healing does not usually begin with confidence. It begins with honesty, with noticing the moment your body tightens before you agree to something you do not want, with noticing how quickly you rush to explain yourself when you sense even a hint of disapproval, with noticing how often you shapeshift just to control the emotional temperature of the room. These are small moments, but they matter, because identity is rarely recovered in one dramatic revelation. It comes back in fragments, a boundary that feels shaky but real, a truth you finally say out loud, a feeling you allow to exist without apologizing for it, a pause before the automatic yes, a quiet admission that something hurt. For someone who has spent years adapting, these are not small things. They are acts of return. And return can feel uncomfortable before it feels freeing. Because when you stop being who others needed, some people will feel the difference. Not everyone was attached to your essence. Some were attached to your accessibility, to your over-functioning, to the version of you that never made things harder for them. So when you begin to reappear, not everyone will celebrate it. That does not mean you are wrong. It may mean you are finally becoming visible. And that visibility can feel almost unbearable at first, because it is vulnerable to be real after years of being managed. But there is something deeper than fear waking up in that moment. There is grief. And grief in this case is not a sign that you are broken. It is a sign that something true is being recognized. You are grieving the years you lived at a distance from yourself, the choices made from fear, the intimacy offered without presence, the life maintained without being fully inhabited. That grief is painful, but it is also honest. And honesty is where real return begins, not in suddenly knowing exactly who you are, but in no longer agreeing to be someone you are not, in no longer confusing disappearance with love, in no longer treating self-betrayal as maturity. Maybe that is the deeper truth. You did not lose yourself because you were flawed. You lost yourself trying to stay loved, trying to stay connected, trying to remain safe inside the hearts of other people. And now the work is different. Now the work is to stay with your own experience long enough to hear it, to stay with your own voice long enough to trust it, to stay present when the old urge says, become easier, become smaller, become what they need. And if you do that, something quiet begins to change. One day, in a moment that does not look dramatic from the outside, you may notice a response that is truly yours, a no that comes without panic, a feeling that no longer needs to hide, a choice that sounds like your own voice, not louder, not harder, just truer. And after years of being loved for who you could be for others, that truth will feel almost sacred, because for the first time in a long time, you will not just be living your life. You will be inside it.